When you close your eyes and imagine God looking at you right now, what expression do you see on his face? Take a moment with that, not the theologically correct answer, the image that actually comes. Here's a second one. Have you ever noticed that the God you've been avoiding and the God you've been performing for look remarkably similar? Both of them distant, both of them disappointed, both of them keeping score. And this one. For anyone who walked away from religion at some point, is it possible that the God you rejected was never the one Jesus was actually revealing? And one more. What would change for you, practically, in the texture of a normal Tuesday, if the image of God you've been carrying turned out to be, in the most important ways, wrong? Those aren't rhetorical questions. I'm going to spend this whole episode trying to answer them. There's a version of God that almost everyone seems to be reacting to. You've seen him. Maybe you've run from him. Or maybe you've spent years trying to satisfy him. He has a face you'd probably recognize immediately if I described him. He's the cosmic accountant, the one who tallies your failures with patient precision. Every shortcut, every promise you didn't keep, every week you missed, noted, weighed. Or maybe he shows up as the demanding employer, the one who requires more than you can produce and watches your output with the permanent expression of someone who expected better. You could always be doing more. You could always be praying longer, giving more, striving harder. The bar moves the moment you reach it. Or he looks like the disappointed father, the one who had real hopes for you and has been watching those hopes erode. Here's what I want to say to both of the people I always carry into this conversation: the one who is exhausted inside faith and the one who walked away from it. If that's the image you've been working with, I understand every response you've had to it. If you left, if you looked at that God and concluded you couldn't pass the test and walked out, that was a rational response, a completely understandable one. If you stayed, if you're still inside, still trying, still showing up, but doing it from a permanent state of striving, trying to get your performance high enough to appease something that never quite seems appeased, that makes complete sense too. Both responses are reasonable. Both responses are to the same image. And here's the thing I need you to hear before we go any further. That image is a distortion. The God you've been avoiding doesn't exist. The God you've been performing for doesn't exist. Both of you have been responding, with perfect rationality, to a fiction. And Jesus came specifically to correct it. I want to take you to a specific moment, a room, the night before the crucifixion in Jerusalem. Jesus is with his disciples at the table. He's been telling them he's about to leave, that he's going somewhere they can't come yet. And he's been trying to prepare them for what's about to happen. And in the middle of that, in John 14, one of his disciples, a man named Philip, interrupts with a request. He says, in verse 8, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us." Now sit with that for a second. Philip had been walking with Jesus for 3 years. He'd watched Jesus raise a dead man out of a tomb. He watched him feed more than 5,000 people with a child's lunch and have 12 baskets of food left over. He'd watched him give sight to a man who had been born blind. He watched him walk across water, heal lepers, calm a storm with a word. 3 years of that, and Philip was still looking for something beyond Jesus. Not because Jesus wasn't enough, but because the image of the Father he carried felt categorically different from the person standing next to him. Jesus was safe. Jesus was approachable. Jesus had called him by name, eaten with him, welcomed him. But the Father was what the temple had always said the Father was: transcendent, unapproachable, the Holy One before whom you did not come unprepared. Philip had absorbed that image for decades. And I suspect what he was really asking wasn't, show us someone more impressive. It was closer to, show us the one we've always been afraid of, so we know what we're dealing with. He's separating what he sees in Jesus from what he expects to find in the Father. So Jesus says in verse 9, "Have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father." The search is over. The revelation has already happened. What Philip was looking for, the Father, fully known, fully visible, had been standing next to him for 3 years, teaching him, eating with him, laughing with him, calling him by name. I am what the Father looks like. Philip's question reveals something important, not just about Philip, but about how a distorted image survives. You can walk with Jesus for 3 years, watch everything he does, and still carry a false picture of the Father in the back of your mind. Not because encounter is insufficient to correct it, but because Philip hadn't yet connected what he was experiencing in Jesus to the Father. He was holding them as two separate things. The encounter was real, the association hadn't been made. That's the correction Jesus offers here. Not more information about the Father, not a separate revelation of someone further up the chain. Look at me. You've already been seeing him. The writers of the New Testament give us 2 words for this, and I want to take you to both of them, because they're the kind of words that, when they land, change the shape of everything. The first is from Paul, writing to the church in Colossae. He says this about Jesus in Colossians 1:15. Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. The word translated image there is the Greek word AY-kohn. Now here's why that matters. AY-kohn doesn't mean a copy. It doesn't mean a resemblance, the way a portrait resembles a person. The word carries a specific philosophical weight. It means the substantive representation through which something invisible becomes visible and knowable. The real thing made accessible through this form. Not like God, not similar to God. The actual image through which God, who cannot otherwise be seen, has made himself available to be known. The second word comes from the writer of Hebrews. He says in chapter 1, verse 3, "He is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature." That phrase, exact representation of his nature, translates the Greek word charakter, a technical term for the impression left by a seal pressed into wax. You press the seal down, you lift it away. What remains on the wax is not an approximation of the seal. It is the exact imprint. Every detail, every mark. Not a close resemblance, the exact imprint. 2 writers, 2 different words, making the same claim from 2 directions. What you see in Jesus is not a softer version of the Father, not a more accessible, toned-down edition of a harsher God hiding somewhere behind the kindness. What you see in Jesus is the Father. The Father made visible. The Father made knowable. The Father pressed into human form so you could actually see what he looks like. Every time Jesus refused to condemn someone, every time he moved toward a person everyone else had written off, every time he said, "I am willing, be clean," every time he told a story about a father running toward a son who was still a long way off, that is the Father. That is what the Father looks like. I want to spend a moment here, not long, on how the distorted image arrived. Because for most people, it didn't come from nowhere. And it's important to say that clearly. It is not your fault that you absorbed it. It arrives through broken fathers, men who couldn't show up the way a father is supposed to, and whose absence or harshness left a template the mind quietly maps onto God. It arrives through religious systems that taught performance as the price of approval, that made the life Jesus offers a transaction. Behave well enough, believe hard enough, show up consistently enough, and God will be satisfied with you. It arrives through suffering that went unexplained, through a silence in prayer that felt like absence, through the gap between what you were told God would do and what he seemed to do. And it arrives, as we named in episode 2, through the enemy's oldest and most persistent strategy, which has always been to corrupt what you believe about God at the root, not to attack your behavior first, to attack your image of God first. Because if he can get the image wrong, everything downstream follows. You pray to a God who is barely tolerating you. You approach confession like a condemned person approaching a judge. You interpret silence as disapproval. You interpret hardship as punishment. A distorted image produces a distorted life. It produces the wheel we talked about in episode 1, the exhausting cycle of trying harder and going nowhere. It produces the performance, the hiding, the avoidance. The image you carry of God is not a minor background detail. It is the architecture, which means the correction, the real correction, isn't trying harder to believe the right things. Information about the correct image of God will not displace an experientially formed false one. We established that in episode 1. It applies here with particular force. You cannot think your way out of a picture that was formed through experience. The correction is encounter, specifically encounter with Jesus, received for what he actually is, the Father made visible. John, writing his first letter, says something so compressed, so dense with meaning, that it's easy to read right past it. He says in 1 John 4:8, "The one who does not love has not known God, because God is love." Not God is loving, not God has love, the way someone might have patience or have courage, as one quality among others. God is love. His very nature, his essence, is love. Self-giving, unconditional, not contingent on your performance, not subject to withdrawal when you fail. It is not one of God's properties that he extends when conditions warrant it. It is what he is. The Father Jesus reveals is the Father in the parable, the one who sees his son returning while he is still a long way off and runs toward him. Not waits, runs. Not sits at a distance with arms folded, waiting for an apology to be completed. Not weighs the quality of the repentance. not checks the son's track record before deciding whether this time the remorse is genuine enough. Runs. Before the speech is finished, before the confession is complete, before the son has proven he means it this time. This is not an image of a God who is reluctantly moving toward you once you've done enough to justify it. That is the image of a father for whom love is not a policy, it's a nature. The God you have been avoiding doesn't exist. The God you've been performing for doesn't exist. The Father who does is already in the room, running, not waiting, moving toward you, not managing you from a distance. And the correction, the encounter that changes the image at the level where it actually lives, is the same one Philip needed. Stop looking for someone beyond Jesus. Look at Jesus. Ask him to show you who he actually is, not the managed, institutional version, not the image handed to you by someone who was working from a distorted picture themselves. Ask him to show you himself. Because in that encounter, as Philip finally understood, you won't find a pointer to the Father. You'll find the Father. I want to lead you into that practice now. If you're driving or your hands are occupied, just listen. Let these words sit. You can come back to this with your full attention whenever you're ready. There's no pressure to do it right now. But if you're somewhere you can be still, close your eyes. Take a breath. Believe. Hold this before you go anywhere else. Jesus is with you right now. Not as a concept, as a person who is present. Here, in the room, in the car, wherever you are. And he is, as the scriptures say, the exact representation of the Father's nature. There is no version of the Father that looks different from Jesus. Whatever the Father is, Jesus is. Begin from that truth. Ask. With whatever is honest in you, say this. Jesus, I want to see you as you actually are. Not the image I've been carrying, not the fiction I've been reacting to. Show me who you are. Look. With the eyes of your heart, the faculty Paul prays would be enlightened in Ephesians 1. Look for him. Don't force the image. Don't manufacture something. Let what comes, come. Notice where he is. Notice his expression. Fix your gaze. Remain there. Don't analyze what you're receiving. Don't immediately try to determine whether it's real or whether you're doing it correctly. Just stay. Let the encounter run its course. Notice how it feels to be in his presence. And notice what, if anything, shifts in your image you arrived with. When you're ready, come back. And before you move on, write down what you saw, immediately, before interpretation. If the Jesus you encountered looks different from the image you brought into the room, write that difference down in as much detail as you can. That difference is the beginning of the correction. The God you've been avoiding doesn't exist. He was never there. He was built from broken pieces, from imperfect fathers, from religion that got the mechanism wrong, from suffering that left a silence that felt like absence, from the enemy's patient work of corrupting the image at the root. The Father who does exist is already in the room. He is not sitting at a distance with a clipboard. He's not waiting for your performance to reach a threshold before he moves toward you. He is not managing you from afar, deciding whether this time the remorse is genuine enough. He is the one who runs. You don't have to clean up the image before you look. You're not required to arrive with the correct theology already in place. You are simply invited to look at Jesus, who is the exact representation of the Father's nature, who is what God looks like when God becomes visible, and to receive what he shows you of himself. That is the practice. That is the correction. Not better information, encounter with Jesus received for who he actually is. The door is open. The Father is already on his way down the road toward you. If what we talked about today opened something for you, the companion to this episode is Chapter 4 of the Inside Out Study Guide. The God you've been avoiding doesn't exist. There are reflection questions there, the practice written out, and a deeper look at the 2 Greek words we walked through today. The anchor article for this episode is called Seeing God. You can also find it at tedtalking.life. It takes the false images Jesus corrected and lays them out one by one. And next time, we move into movement 2. We've been diagnosing the problem for 4 episodes. Next time, we start talking about the reality underneath it. What grace actually is, where it starts, why you can't outrun it, and why you don't have to. That's episode 5, The Reality of Grace. I'll see you there.